Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Justin Bayarjon, and welcome back to Dr. VR, the podcast where we dive deep into the world of immersive and digital media with visionaries who are reshaping the way we experience reality. Today, I'm absolutely thrilled to introduce a guest who's not only pushing boundaries in immersive art, but also redefining how we understand our connection to the natural world. Tosca Terán is an interdisciplinary artist, XR creator, and innovator whose groundbreaking work explores her symbiotic relationships between humans, fungi, and technology. Her latest project, Symbiosis, Dysbiosis, Sentience, that premiered at Venice Immersive 2024 and has captivated audiences with its breathtaking fusion of live biodata, mycelial networks, and participatory mixed reality. With a passion for blurring the lines between science, technology, and art, Tosca's creations go beyond traditional storytelling. They're living, breathing ecosystems that invite us to reimagine our place in a connected world. In fact, we're in this connected world right now, and it's absolutely beautiful. And we'll be diving into the fascinating process behind symbiosis dysbiosis, exploring the challenges of working with living mycelium, and discussing the future of immersive participative art. Tosca, welcome to Dr. VR. It's such an honor to have you here.
Thank you. It's an honor to have been invited by you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So, Symbiosis Dysbiosis integrates mycelium biodata and human input in real time. So, what inspired you to explore this intersection between biological networks and immersive technology?
Well, I've been working with and cultivating different organisms to try to hear them, if you will, or like how we might be able to reinterpret sounds, and recognizing that that has to be altered a bit for our hearing or reinterpreted, like
For
kind of
sure.
biodata sonification types of things.
Mhm.
And I've just really wanted to bring a non-human element to virtual reality, being very human centric. I felt in thinking of different voices, but how, if we could do that, like how that might work or how we might interpret, bioelectrical activity in a VR situation, combining it with human biodata like EEG or heart rate, things like that.
That's so interesting. How did the concept of I'm really like asking myself that question. How did the concept of making the invisible visible evolve during the creative process?
Well, I I've been really fascinated for some time with microbiology and then, microbiome and all the organisms, like to use like Donna Haraway's kind of multi-species muddle is what
Hmm.
she likens it to.
Yeah.
And so we don't, we don't have microscopic vision, but in VR, you can have microscopic vision. Like you can do anything really in here. It's just limited to your imagination. And I was thinking of how to show like I mean, right now I'm wearing my kind of fungi avatar here, but as a human, right, we have like all these bacteria, microbes, and fungus like on us and around us in our air streams. There's a lot of spore activity that happens
Yeah.
annually. And I thought that would be really fascinating to have that element and also the hearing, kind of to show like for instance, what's between us that we don't see in real life, like what we might leave behind when we touch things or when these things touch us.
That's so interesting. And in fact, right now we're in microscopic mode, I believe, right?
Well, we're we're not totally microscopic, but we are much smaller. Like if you look around at these mushrooms around us, so we're in part of the world experience where like you enter the experience in actual human scale. And
Yeah.
then as you move through the environment, you're growing smaller and smaller, meeting different forest creatures like insects, and then eventually entering the microbial realm of the mycelium network. So yeah, so right now we're a little bit smaller than some insects, I'd say. Yeah.
Okay. That's absolutely fascinating. I don't think I've ever experienced anything like this. And I'm sure creating an experience like this one had its fair share of challenges. So I'm just wondering if you could please walk us through the challenges of working with also living mycelium and translating its biodata into art and music.
Okay, so well, the one of the biggest challenges is interpreting that in that like anthropomorphizing it. Of course, at this point, still in the game, we have to because we haven't figured out yet how to actually, or I should say, maybe understand communication that might be happening between us and the mycelium. Or any organisms we're kind of researching. Because the mycelium grows and it's expanding, I generally have, I'll say, success, or I feel it's the organism's thriving. It's not being contaminated. It's not growing any, molds or strange things. Like the fungus doesn't have another fungus attacking it, which is good. So we're interpreting, I guess, say like its calm state as a positive, and a more active state as it's being stressed, or so we look at that as the negative, let's say, for lack of a better term. And just that.
Wow,
Did I answer your question?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But how do you translate that into music? Because I know that music is such a huge part of the experience.
So what we're doing is it's essentially, because it's the bioelectrical activity, it's similar in our brainwave activity, like in bringing that even into a sonic type of situation. You're working with control voltages. So we can take these control voltages, and the type of synthesizers we're working with are Eurorack modules. So, and it's all live. It's most of our modules are analog, and I mean, it would be okay even if they were digital. But so if you're unfamiliar, there's like lots of patch points, and some of those patch points, it's CV is what it's called. So control voltage. So like 1 voltage to 5 volts generally is the information that comes through, and gate information. So that might be like a square wave versus a sine wave.
Oh, wow.
And so that's one instance. So we're bringing that data in, and often you can do that with different modules are available, or you can build them yourself. And that can be interpreted through MIDI data. So MIDI, the biodata boards use a 555 timer chip, which act as the galvanizer. And then it's taking pulses that come through from the activity of the fungus, and say if it's a 0 and a 1. So if it's a 1, that data comes through, gets quantized to different notes or different scales, or generally we're quantizing it within our Eurorack synth system, and not, say, the biodata module. And then we patch out from there. There's all kinds of cables, and it looks quite intense to a lot of people because of all these patch points. And then that's how we're triggering different things. Or so the mushroom, or let's say the mycelium in this instance, its activity when it's active is triggering all these different events that are happening. So it's like, in fact, turning knobs or flipping switches,
Wow.
and things like that. So even in a digital, like in a DAW or digital audio workstation, you would then choose a voice, and it would be interpreting that. So I'll just add quickly that often that voice, though, on the synthesizer is interpreted too then by people, anthropomorphize that even further. Like if it's a pentatonic, minor scale versus a major scale, people might think, oh, the mushroom is sad right now, or oh, it sounds really happy, but
wow.
it's just so that it's interesting to me that I don't necessarily see it as a bad thing when people anthropomorphize, for instance, mycelium, because in my experience so far, that translates usually in people are kind of treating these different organisms better. Like they're considering how they walk through, say, a forest, for instance, a bit differently, and how they're looking at it and experiencing it.
That makes a lot of sense, but I can't believe what I'm hearing. It's insane. It's fascinating. I didn't know shrooms could do stuff like that, you know?
Well, yeah, and they do. I mean, there's all kinds of interesting papers out there. Um, Andrew Adamatsky is someone that's been researching like slime molds and different mycelium for some time now, and even in the 80s, I believe there's a paper where these scientists were first finding action potential of fungus, like brain or similar to our brain activity. And over probably the past 5 or 6 years, this has really kind of exploded and taken off.
Wow.
Where people just are really interested in that and different forms of, can we communicate through frequencies, ultrasound, like different methods of maybe finding how to communicate with forest fungus to maybe stop it from invading something. Like, I don't see it as a negative. If a fungus is parasitic in an environment, I believe it absolutely, the whole ecosystem there knows what's going on and why something is perhaps these trees are being removed to let more light in or to let something new grow. I mean, maybe it's just an invasive species that's been brought into an area where it doesn't have its natural predator. So if we could send a frequency to it that might make it change its course, that would be amazing, for sure.
Wow.
But then if we start maybe interpreting that, could we interpret that language? That's the whole other thing. Like, yeah.
Wow. And that's fascinating. And let's take that fascinating discussion moving into the experience itself, which is a participatory piece. And how do the audience's actions influence the biodata, and what kind of impact does that create on the overall experience?
Okay, you're in this experience, guests are wearing at the physical XR installation, everyone wears a Muse 2 EEG device. So that is reading your brainwave information, and we send that into the experience using open sound control, so OSC. You can work with that in Resonate and some other VR platforms, which is fantastic. And then along with the mycelium biodata, which we bring in similarly, we have it connected in a way that when you, the guest, are in, say, a focused state. And what's interesting is when people come into VR, into our onboarding space, their brainwave activity, if we're, observing it in the moment, is very active. And the moment they enter the forest area, we see that go into more of a calm state. And so it right now, I mean, we haven't fully researched this or really dove into it yet, but it appears you're more in kind of a dream state, or like you're sleeping, and which is fantastic for connecting with the mycelium. So usually the deeper people move through here, they're just really, for lack of a better term, they're really vibing with the environment.
Sure.
And what happens at that point is when your brainwave activity aligns with the mycelial activity, your avatar starts to transform. So everybody's wearing a human when they come in here, and then your human avatar starts to transform into holobiont version of
Hmm.
yourself. So, and of course, on a very science fiction level. And also, what's happening is like right now, you probably notice this little organism flying between
Yeah.
us. So,
Sure.
when we have our EEG devices on, this activates and will go to the people whose brainwaves are in alignment.
Hmm.
And when the mycelium biodata is in, it's connected not just to like, so your brainwave activity and mycelium are connected to the avatar, but things only happen when that activity aligns. The mycelium is also driving aspects of the world itself. That's with emission maps, height maps, normal maps, and things looking like they're breathing and moving or colors changing,
Yeah.
certain effects taking place and stuff like that.
Wow, that makes sense. And personally, I was really vibing with the environment. I think it's a great choice of word
Yeah.
to describe it. And it's, of course, it's a very immersive piece. The immersive nature of the project invites viewers or players or users to interact with the symbiotic relationships between humans and fungi. So, how have participants reacted, and were there any responses that surprised you? Of course, you mentioned the EEG, so I'm just wondering.
Yeah, it's always really interesting to talk to people after the experience, especially the people that experienced transforming. So connecting with the mycelium, especially again in the physical installation at Venice, there was this fairly large spherical terrarium that's in the center of the space in front
Mm-hmm.
of the synthesizers that has electrodes and wires coming out going into one of the PCs. And so people see this and they're very fascinated. And the mycelium was incredibly, like, it loved the environment. It was growing all over the inside of this terrarium, and so it had created this atmosphere. So people see that, and at first, even though you talk to them, they kind of get it. They're going, "Oh, okay, that's really interesting. This is beautiful and fascinating." But then they're wearing this EEG device, and either they're witnessing one of the people with them on the journey transforming,
Mm-hmm.
and that they're really going, "Whoa, what's happening to you?" Because people are, I think, "Wow, you're turning into a tree, or you're turning into a mushroom," or
Yeah.
but when it's happening to you, you feel it like in the haptics, like in the controllers. So you feel this vibration. We have certain frequencies that play only in that person's head that this is happening to,
Mm-hmm.
towards maybe bringing them more into a calm state, towards transforming further. There's
Yep.
5 stages of transformation. First is you're just a human, and then 1 to 3, it's your hands start to change, your arms.
Yep.
So we've had people cry, like, with just, they felt a very profound connection.
Mm.
And that they said that this one woman said that she had never considered the intelligence of other life forms, such as like not a mammal, or
Yeah.
something like a mushroom, for instance. This other person was so into and this was fantastic. She was so into the experience that at one point in the experience, you're climbing the steps of Ganoderma, and she fell off. And when she fell, she let out this incredibly loud scream in the experience. And it was just, we've heard people say they feel a visceral, like, even,
Wow.
yeah, they're feeling something visceral. Someone felt they were really, well, we have spores and things that you can eat here, and
Yeah.
it changes the whole view of everything. And so it's very psychedelic. And some people felt that they were really having a psychedelic trip. So, yeah. So it's
That's so
really, it's
cool.
interesting how, and so that is also affecting the experience though for everyone, because the deeper immersed you are, like, that's your brainwave activity is absolutely aligning with that fungal bioactivity, which is really fascinating too. Like people with the Muse app, you can see calm states and active state stillness. Like there's different levels. And a lot of the people that are connecting, even though they're moving around and gathering objects in here and talking to strange insects, they were in like a 90 to 96% calm state. So, yeah, it's interesting to us, like how people are experiencing it.
It absolutely is. Something that is very interesting to me is the fact that you work with live actors.
Mm-hmm.
Something that I first ever experienced with the Meta movie. Shout out to Jason Moore and
Yeah.
the wonderful team. In fact, I'm wearing the costume right now of one of the heroes. And also, you're working with dynamic soundtrack, something that's amazing. So, Symbiosis, Dysbiosis feels very theatrical as well. How did you approach blending performance art with XR technology?
Yeah. So I wanted to, at first, like the first iteration of this was thinking about point clouds and maybe having a scan of some mushrooms, and people could come in, just see your hands, and maybe you touch this and something would happen.
Mm-hmm.
But I really wanted to expand on that more and have people, you know, be more in a particular environment. And I was thinking rainforests in British Columbia, old growth forests,
Yeah.
and how, it would be really great if they met these different creatures that might live in a forest. So there is a script. There is a script. Sorry, I moved there. Um, and but there's only, let's say, certain lines. Like it's really been fascinating working with these performers because there's a lot of improv that takes place and has to take place in this kind of VR theater when you want guests, I call them, instead of users or players.
Yeah.
If you want guests to really interact, and you've got to think of, oh, there's going to be a lot of improv, because then if it's not improv, you're just expecting people to kind of stand there and watch like a movie in a way, which is okay too, but it's different. So you can interact, and the performers just remain in character in how they respond. And
Okay.
yeah, and so it is as if it's kind of, I mean, it is very theater-like in that way. And one of the characters is using hand talk. So they have the lines that they're speaking, but they're also telling you a different story about the forest with their hands.
Yes, I remember.
There's been maybe two people that really picked up on hand talk would eventually become integrated into ASL. So the moth character is telling you kind of what you need to do and where you need to go with their hands. And then musically, I have been able to take people on sound walks. My partner and I have been creating music as Nanotopia for a long time. And I really like the idea of being able to create like a live soundscape, and just wondered, could we do that? Like old time talkie movies, like silent films where they'd have musical accompaniment.
Of course. Yes.
So and how music really, and I'm not saying I'm wanting to manipulate people, but how music really does in film manipulate your emotions. I mean, think about Titanic, for instance, and how, the music and certain aspects were happening and people were really heartbroken over certain times, or you're scared, or, you're tense. And so just creating themes for the characters, and, but where the mycelium is also creating that. So there's certain areas within the experience, like the onboarding, it's only the mycelium that's playing, and other parts of the map, people are only hearing the mycelium, and then, we might boost it a bit or kind of take off into more kinds of sci-fi, old school electronic music in other areas.
So I really agree with you, and I actually believe that when you watch a movie, I think the eyes sees better when you hear better. That's
Hmm.
just how I see it, and it makes sense with your experience. Um, so the experience leverages a mix of mycelium biodata, EEG, and PPG data. So I'm just wondering here, I mean, EEG stands for electroencephalogram, which is a test that measures electrical activity in the brain, which is done during the experience through the muse that we use, while PPG stands for photo photoplethysmography. You correct me if I'm wrong. Excuse my French,
No
which
problem.
is a simple optical technique used to detect volumetric changes in blood and peripheral circulation. Lots of technology involved here. Now, what was the most technically demanding part of implementing these systems?
It well, it really has to do with, like, okay, so right now, working with the Muse, we go from the Muse headband
Yeah.
to the Muse app
Mm-hmm.
to then, and that's like on an Android or iOS device that then pushes that information into the PC in the Muse Lab, which is another app,
Mm-hmm.
and then that sends into Resonate. So honestly, the challenge is that we're having to bridge these different devices
Oh,
and
for sure.
apps. Yeah.
Yeah.
It used to be, so when first iteration, and I mean, we were working with OpenBCI technology, but that
Mm-hmm.
is a lot um, of actual electrodes that have to, stick in your hair with either dry electrodes or gel. Where the
Yeah.
Muse is so fantastic because it's just using gold, like a gold band, and they've worked on like this data and research is like they've been doing it for years to come up
Mm-hmm.
with combining the brainwave frequencies into what they call their Muse metric. But prior to, say, open sound control, we were working with Python and just a lot of different kind of the workflow or pipeline was much larger. And we knew we wanted to cut that back because there's a lot of room for something to maybe go down within that. Like now we're just the app, two apps into Resonate, where
Oh,
it used
wow.
to be a lot more than that.
Yeah.
And we're working on it to where we might just be able to circumvent one of those apps and go straight, because the great thing about Muse, I think for any artist too, like definitely for researchers as well, I know that are working
Yeah.
with it, but it's working with open sound control, and that's really great
Hmm.
because then you can, there's all kinds of different applications. I mean, Unity accepts open sound control, Unreal, Touch Designer, but also then even on the Muse Lab app, that's also open sound control that's going into Resonate. And Resonate accepts, obviously, open sound control,
Mm-hmm.
receiving and sending, as do, I think, a couple other VR platforms. So I guess I don't know if that really answers it. Like I
It
mean,
does. Yeah.
it that was really probably the most difficult, was figuring out, what's the easiest way. There's another app that's people will work with or have worked with called Mind Monitor, that costs some money, but it's really interesting. But you're not looking at the same, like you've got the brainwave frequencies, but they're very noisy, where the Muse app is absolutely not. It's the Muse metric is what you want to work with, and then the heart rate data, and that's the
Yeah.
PPG, or it's kind of emotional. So it's looking at your blood oxygen level or your humidity,
Mm-hmm.
and it can kind of read an emotional state, and that's fantastic. But yeah, I think that open sound control, it was really a lifesaver.
Oh, I'm
Because
sure.
yeah, definitely
I'm sure.
made things a lot easier for us to be able to work with.
So on top of that, you use mixed reality. So how does your approach to creating mixed reality experiences differ from traditional immersive works?
Well, I think because we have it's the physical, there's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah.
If I think I'm understanding the question correctly, it's uh, so generally somebody might just create a VR experience and everything you're not reliant on or wanting to work with sensors to
Mhm.
I think this is going to change though, or it's gradually starting to, because it's really fascinating to be like, I love VR and all the different worlds and experiences people are creating. But I just really find it interesting if you can bring in your emotions and
Yeah, for sure.
your, I don't want to say thoughts, but it's like your brain activity through an an experience, and that's influencing your experience and
Yeah,
affecting.
humanizing the
Yeah,
experience.
yeah,
Yes.
it's impacting. You can literally, like, we have people impacting the environment. So it's symbiosis, dysbiosis, and there is a
Yes.
dysbiosis aspect to it. The symbiosis, I mean, it's being super loosely interpreted here in that, like, you're creating a symbiotic or you're seeing your relationship with the environment as you connect. But perhaps maybe you don't connect and you
Mhm.
don't work with the other people
Yeah.
on the journey, you don't listen to the actors, or you're off running around or you're just, sometimes people can be destructive. I think they're just wanting to test worlds or whatever, but you might end up in a completely different forest environment that is on fire or flooded or um yeah.
A lot of moving parts here.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
This is mind blowing. Uh, and also, you've worked with an incredible team on this project. A lot of people involved. How did you ensure
Hmm.
that the collaboration remained cohesive and true to your artistic vision?
Well, thank you. And yes, it is an incredible team.
Yeah.
I've been working with neuroscientist and game coder Brendan Lehman, who is based in Toronto as well as I am.
Hmm.
And we met in 2018, 2019, pre-pandemic, during a workshop that they were running. And I just say that I'll interaccess.org. They were hosting a workshop there on biodata into VR. And I had already
Oh,
been working
okay.
with biodata. So when I saw, like, wait a minute, biodata into VR, uh-oh, I've got to reach out to this person.
Well,
And
yeah.
so, yeah, so we connected, and then I just kind of kept that in mind. And in 2020, we reconnected during the Goethe Institute's New Nature Climate Science Exchange.
Mm.
I was able to, through then a Dames making games and residency, to reach out and ask Brendan, hey, would you want to collaborate with me on this? So Brendan and I really formed the first, like, kind of iteration of Symbiosis, Dysbiosis,
Mm.
and we just kept working together and iterating. And then I decided I think it'd be really great to have this on a social VR platform, because we are trying to create kind of this multiplayer or this shared environment. And I think it'd be good to have more than one person go through, and we could really see how people might connect with the EEG and different things like that. So Brendan's been really strong, just like I call them the rock through, all these different
Yeah.
iterations. And then I met Rick's, Sven Steffens, and Rick's is incredible. And I think many of us think a genius. Sorry, Rick's. But and so we were introduced. We worked together for the MMC 24, which takes place next year, February, March. It's kind of a creator jam, a big competition where people can create all kinds of different things. And Rick's is just really fantastic, and I shared this concept with them. And so a lot of people just really seem to be interested, definitely, in microbial life. Again, like what's honest, this idea of we are surrounded by all these different organisms, or if they're not honest, they're around us and we're breathing them in. And being able to work on something like that. And for the actors too, VR performers, um, this too is really new and something that I think it's really fascinating to actual theater people, acting people, but there's also people that are just embodying avatars in VR that have this innate ability to, it's interesting. You put on, it's like a costume, I feel, and they want to embody these different forms, or people feel more comfortable also with certain avatars. So we just have been gradually building up a really great team here in Resonate. And I feel really lucky. And I do for sure, to have met the people I have, and that they are really just wanting to push it further and see, how immersed can we get people even in remote performances and stuff like that. So we've had our drama for sure, but for the most part, I'd say with the core group, it's been fantastic. And we just all really listen to each other. And that's the thing too, for me, is Rick's often has incredible ideas that are just like, whoa, like, okay, let's do that. Like, I'm open to integrating things too. It's not so hard line that it has to be my way or the highway. And I think that's what also helps, is being super flexible.
And it is indeed very collaborative. And kudos to your performers, because I think they're all amazing and they really help a lot immersing us into the environment when it's happening. And I'm wondering here, what role does interdisciplinarity play in your work, and how has that shaped your perspective as an artist?
Well, I've been allowed access to labs, and like the Earth Sciences Lab at the University of Toronto. I had a residency in 2022 at the Cola Center of Biological Art at SUNY Buffalo. And that was fantastic. And I've just also, because of the space, I'd say, that I ran in Toronto, my studio space, and what kinds of workshops I would host and people I'd have teach workshops, I've just had a lot of connections with different people in the science community and my research. So I'd say I've really spoken to a lot of different mycologists, microbiologists in different aspects of how things might look or how something might work. And then, I guess sonically and different frequencies that, thinking, binaural beats, but not having binaural beats happening, but looking at different frequencies that might play. There's some interesting papers, for instance, out on mycelium and how mycelium tend to expand and grow further with low frequencies being played or kind of sitting on that. It made me think of a Chladni plate where, you have water or sand and the speaker is playing certain frequencies and the sand makes certain patterns, or the water does. Thinking about that. But yeah, interdisciplinary. I was working for a long time with metal and glass. I still am. But things just have shifted. Before that, it was digital, then physical, hands-on, always trying to incorporate electronics somehow into my work. Either, you'd pick an object up and it would make a sound, or you'd look at a video and a tiny screen inside of something. So I think I've always been waiting in the back burner for VR to finally happen. From Jaron Lanier, like first in his incredible, his instruments.
Yes.
And that really inspired, and I was like, oh, that's fantastic. And yeah, there's still a lot of things I would like to be able to have happen for XR installations, and that is something kind of being worked on the side, is where there's objects that you pick up in the real world, that they correlate with things in the virtual world, and
For sure.
yeah,
Yeah. And it's only the beginning.
yeah, for real.
For real. It's only the beginning. And you went to Venice.
Yeah.
And this is quite amazing. What was it like premiering Symbiosis, Dysbiosis at Venice Immersive in 2024 this year? And how did the festival environment influence the reception of your piece?
I think, well, I'm pretty sure it was the first time they've ever had something like this there. They have different,
I'm sure.
yeah, there's other types of installations, but it's more felt like a set where you stand there with a headset, where for us it was definitely the whole installation integrated more so with the environment, and having that mycelium there with the live music, and how the space was built, like depending on how you're going to install or show your work. Venice will build you, like they'll give you kind of a shell. And something that was fantastic is they did soundproof as much as they could, because they knew there was going to be music happening. They weren't sure how loud that was going to be, or the low frequencies also vibrating everything, like the walls and the floors and whatnot. But people would have to take off their shoes when they came in, which we had like black carpeting, and we asked people to remove their shoes just because outside of the space, the floors were still kind of had construction dust and things like that. So if you walked onto that black carpeting, you were going to leave footprints, and it was just kind of a mess. But this helped because it made it even more like, here you're entering this different world now. You're having to literally take off your shoes, come in, and you would go and, you could choose a seat, and then neurochems or Brendan Lehman would come and help, show you the EEG device, talk to each person individually, and, put the EEG device on them, and then that was calibrated. And then one of the performers would come and then help with the headset. And so people are first, they're seeing, like, because it was a dimly lit environment, and the terrarium was in the center. I think that people were just really fascinated with what in the heck is that? Because we also had on one of the walls, like we also projected the live kind of environment on one of the walls. So the idea was, when the actors would each, have their time in the world speaking to the guests, they would be there in the headset performing. So there was a window in place, and then people were also invited to come in outside of headsets to kind of observe. They could interact too with the mycelium if they wanted. There were touch pads that act like electrodes. So if they put their hands on those, they're kind of creating a duet then with the mycelium, which is heard in the environment, and certain things happen. They can see the actors, and then they also see them then in avatar being projected. So that was really new and super fascinating. I think too, for some people, they just see more possibilities. I'd like to hope too. I mean, from what we gathered, people were just really excited about this moving forward. Like, are we going to experience more types of installations like this, where there's actually, maybe there are actors, we're seeing this performance, because, this could have had a whole other audience too that are outside of that interacting. And yeah, I think it just really, it inspired. I know that the curators, I'd often see them looking through the window with different groups of people, and I could tell they were explaining like what, this is the mycelium in the terrarium, this is music being created, and
Yeah.
yeah.
And I know participatory experiences are very interesting for curators and festivals because it just shows something different. Because sometimes people just refer to virtual reality as video games or just
Yes.
watching a movie in a different way. So it really adds a different layer to it. I know it was some kind of a prerequisite for the official competition at Cannes last year
Mm.
to be like multiplayer, to be participatory. And you mentioned moving forward, looking ahead. Where do you see the future of immersive mixed reality experiences going, particularly ones involving like live biodata and participatory elements?
I feel this really can add more to a story that you're trying
For
to
sure.
tell, especially if it does absolutely relate to something in the physical world. For advocacy, I mean, ultimately, all of this technology and this world that we're sharing with Symbiosis, Dysbiosis, Sentience has a message. Um, you know, we're wanting people to really recognize more of how they move through the environment and how much they impact the
Yeah.
shared environment. So I mean, my hope is, but I see this being taken on even by, I think Meta has a band that they're coming out with that will read some sort of bio data. And they also, they're upgrading their hand tracking abilities.
Yeah.
Then OpenBCI has partnered with Vario with the incredibly beautiful, but unfortunately radically expensive still headset that
Yes.
integrates EEG. But there's other, Muse is really wanting to work with more artists in different ways, and VR is definitely one of those ways.
For sure.
And yeah, there's different technologies and plus haptics. I think haptics, not just looking like a vest that you're going into battle wearing. These,
Yeah.
well, these are changing too. Like, and people are trying to find other ways of
For
working
sure.
with touch and feeling. And so I'm really optimistic. I feel there's going to be even more types of XR installations and more VR theater happening in 2025 and
Oh yeah, by far.
2026 for
For
sure.
sure.
Yeah,
Yes.
and so I'm excited about that. And people trying to do more biodata in different ways. Like, so how can you step into somebody else's shoes maybe and feel what they're feeling,
Ah,
and
yes,
things like
absolutely.
that. Yeah.
I believe too. It adds a lot of um, I want to use the word layers, but it adds more value to the medium. And really, it's important for it to be dissociated with from cinema, because it's a completely new, different art form.
Yeah,
We're
I agree.
seeing new things, and just we're thinking about virtual reality games or VR games or VR films. I think it's important to dissociate ourselves, well, not ourselves, but the medium
Yeah.
from these already well established medium and just creating its own thing. And I think what you're doing really helps a lot,
Thank you.
establishing it as a as its own thing, as its really unique new medium. And I thank you very much for this.
Thank you. I absolutely agree that it should not be. I mean, I understand why it would be compared a bit
Of
to
course, well,
cinema,
it's
but
screens,
it's not
yeah,
at all.
yeah,
Its own, and even on a marketing front, I feel
yes,
it, and production, it needs to be viewed differently because there are a lot of artists behind that, right? And
yeah.
independent, not just big studios. And so, yeah, I agree.
Absolutely. Lastly, Tosca, what's next for you? What's next for your team? Do you plan to expand Symbiosis, Dysbiosis, Sentience, or also exploring new avenues in XR art?
Both.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. We're looking at some festivals
Hmm.
in the new year up ahead that we're really excited for. I don't think I can totally mention that yet, but that, yeah, some stuff's happening, and we're
Yeah.
looking at. Um, I mean, I would like to launch this too, like have it show in Toronto for sure. In
Oh,
Canada,
yeah.
I think
That'd
it
be
would be
great.
really important. I mean, the Canada Arts Council and Ontario Arts Council helped support this project, but to integrate more. So we are evolving it more, things that we just didn't have the time to
Yeah.
complete for Venice, and that is more haptics, evolving more aspects that are already in place, but not, let's say tied in the environment. Scent, working with haptic solutions. We have scent emitters and things like that that will give just a slight, maybe subliminal sense that or you're smelling something or sensing something
Oh,
else.
that'd be so
Yeah,
great.
yeah,
Yes. For sure, for sure. Well,
yeah.
thank you so much, Tosca, for all of this, for this beautiful environment we're in right
Thank
now.
you. Thank
I
you.
just hope like the people are looking at it right now. And I mean, you're looking at it from a screen right now, but I really hope you can all sign in to experience it.
Yeah, for sure.
Going into the world, I believe you have shows coming up as well in the
Yeah,
next couple of weeks.
we have a show. Well, we have shows happening. The last show for 2024 is December
Yeah.
28th. And then we have one show in January 25th is already sold out, which, yay, thank you. And then January 4th. And then, we're having some more shows take place in the beginning of the year. And then we're going to have to dive in and get ready
For
for
sure.
These festivals. But yeah, so
So where
sign
can
up,
we, yeah,
register.
and where can we sign up? Where can we follow you?
So there's the symbiosis-dysbiosis.com website. I'll give you a link you can
For
share
sure.
for that. And we invite people to join our Discord server, the Mycelium Network. They can reach out to us, and we're happy to have you come in as a myconaut. Or Instagram, Nanotopia Net, or Moth Antler. That's
Yes.
me. But yeah, and we on our website we have all the remote show information listed there, as well as upcoming festivals that we might be physically at, if not remotely at, and different things that are taking place, and information can be found there.
Tosca, thank you so much for being on Dr. VR. Thanks for accepting the invitation, and thanks for inviting me in your beautiful world.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Dr. VR, like, it's just really exciting and it's wonderful. I'm glad that you enjoyed your experience. And thanks for having me on your show.